أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذي أذهب الله عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا رب اشرح لي رب اشرح لي ويسر لي أمري رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري. Sorry, I'm just not able to recall the dua right now. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي يفوض أمري إلى الله بصير بالعباد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum jamian wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We started.
And welcome to our session into Ayatul Kursi. It's been a long gap, so please pardon my rustiness. But inshallah, we'll get back to it slowly with Allah's help and permission. So I'm very inspired today to actually play the entire Ayatul Kursi before we dive into our session. Because the word of God itself has that power to open the hearts. So I'm just going to play a recording of Ayatul Kursi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يئوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم الله ولي الذين آمنوا يخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور والذين كفروا أولياءهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So, Ayatul Kursi, as we know, we've been saying, is the metaphorical representation of the throne of God. And we keep saying it to be that place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resides. Now, when we talk about Ayatul Kursi, we begin with the first verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahu La ilaha illa huwa. So we had reached this place of understanding of the different letters in the first verse. And then we had gone back into understanding the entire concept of the Aital Kursi. What is it and what does it represent? And then we had started talking about the heart. So today I was really inspired to go through this book, Gary Zukav's book, Seat of the Soul. And the reason I was so inspired is because the title itself is the seat. And that is what we say when we say Ayatul Kursi. Kursi is the seat, the chair, right? And I haven't read the whole book, but I just opened a page and beautifully it opened to the chapter of, let me show you, chapter of the heart. So it was so beautiful. And I felt inspired to share what I was going through in this book. So over here, there's something that Gary Zukov is discussing, which he calls, just a second, I highlighted it here. He talks about this concept in physics, which says a body in uniform motion will remain in uniform motion until it is acted upon by a force. It's a law in physics, right? That we stay in a state of motion, in a state of movement, in a particular velocity, unless something opposite to that force comes and changes that particular motion. And what he's saying in this book is that a human being's life will keep moving in a particular direction until and unless a force comes and changes that direction in that person's life. So, we choose to do these lives, which are generally, stipulated discipline of what you're supposed to do in your life. Get an education, get a house, get married, have children, and give them good education, have a good neighborhood. And these are like some milestones that we choose to keep in our lives in order to decide whether our lives are successful or not. And sometimes it's delayed, sometimes it's not, but generally these become a reason for us to believe whether we have succeeded in life or not, right? So now, if we put ourselves in that motion, if we put ourselves in that journey and we keep moving in that particular direction, then that means that until and unless something else will not come and stop us, we will keep going in that direction. We will keep moving in that particular motion. And he gives an example of two people. And he talks about this man called Hank in his book. And he says that, Hank was his friend in school and college, and they were friends. Then Hank went into military. Then he found a radio announcer who was very famous, and he got engaged to her, and he gets married. Now, what he says here is that over here is that when I met Hank now as a civilian, after many years, he meets his friend. He says that when I met Hank now as a civilian, he looked troubled and his easygoing manner was dampened. He had changed his name and apologized that his wife was unable to join us. We spoke for a while, and when I asked him what he was doing with himself, he told me, looking for my place in the sun. And then the next news that he got about Hank was that Hank took his life, and it was a very painful story, and he was going through a lot of despondency. There was a lot of despair, which led to this event in his life. When he spoke to his wife, he found out that this is what happened with Hank. Now he writes about Hank and he says that Hank was not the kind of person to ask himself deeper questions about his life. He did not inquire into the deeper meaning of his existence upon the earth, because that would have caused him to change his life. And he did not want to do that. He lived his life without much reflection. And one day he awoke to overwhelming emptiness and powerlessness. Now, the reason he's explaining this story is that he's saying that because Hank was in a particular motion in life, he was moving in a particular direction. The reason he was not asking the deeper questions is because Hank knew that if I ask the deeper questions, I might stumble upon answers that will change me. I will have to make some changes. So, ignorance was bliss for him. He was deciding to stay in ignorance, but that left him completely empty. And he found it difficult to do life because a part of himself he had been ignoring, a part of himself he was not willing to look into, because he himself knew that if he asked those questions and went deeper into himself, he will have to make changes. A motion, a force will have to enter his life that will now change the motion. So when we say that a body in uniform motion will remain in uniform motion until it is acted upon by a force, what does uniform motion mean in terms of human life? And what is the force that alters that motion? Now, now this is what Gary Zukov goes on to say. He says that Hank experienced the situations in life that were necessary to the balancing of the energy of his soul. He responded to them in accordance with the conditioning that he had acquired through um, the karma of his soul and the environment into which he was born, and he created more karma unconsciously with each response. Now, what we're seeing here is that there is this denial, there's this um, refusal to let that force act upon yourself, because there's a comfort to life when we choose to continue doing the same habit, the same routine, and that sharp focus on these milestones that we want in our life, that we keep looking for a certain sense of predictability and stability in our life. And this is what Hank was doing. But then if you hear interviews of celebrities, celebrities like Will Smith, Jim Carrey, and Keanu Reeves, they're from Hollywood. But these men, they will say that, interestingly, I can't think of any women, but what they would say is that I wish I could tell you that I got everything in my life, the money, the house, the spouse, the fame, the popularity, everything. We got everything. But I just wish I could explain to people that that is not enough. There is a huge void within us which stays unchecked because of the lack of inner growth, inner work, inner satisfaction. And it's when these people acquired all what they were hoping to acquire that they realized that in that motion of life, and when there was a refusal to accept the force on this motion, the force that would change the course of this motion, that they found an emptiness in their life. So this is the thing, that Hank's life was a body in a uniform motion that never encountered a force. Now he gives another example. He says, what is the force that Hank's life did not encounter? Gregory was another man, he says, and his childhood was emotionally difficult, and he grew up angry, manipulative, and bitter. He was incapable of forming relationships, and his violent temper and argumentative nature kept people at a distance. This further increased Gregory's disdain for life and for other people, but he did not stop to ask what role he played in his experiences. When at last his temper and his disagreeable disposition caused the woman that he was living with to leave, Gregory fell into deep anguish, not only because of this loss, but also because he recognized In the latest event, the repetition of a long-standing pattern in which he found himself. In each instance, suffering from rejection, he determined to confront both his pain and his pattern. He made arrangements to live in solitude while he searched within himself for the deepest causes of his painful life. What we're seeing in Gregory is an awakening. Gregory is recognizing that I am doing something wrong. There's a pattern. I keep repeating my mistakes. Gregory is also seeing a pain and he's recognizing the pain. He's not numbing it. And he is able to see the urgency of looking into this pain because he is allowing this emotion of pain to exist, to be acknowledged, and then to look into that pain. Heart is that organ, heart is that faculty within us that enables us to feel these emotions. Now, if we look at the heart and we look at the role emotions play, Gary Zukov has explained earlier on in this chapter that emotions are what help us look into our thoughts and actions, and these emotions create these feelings that keep us alive and going as a human being, and our hearts stay alive. Now, when Gregory is deciding to look into his pain, he is using this faculty of the heart. That means that there is an energetic current, there's an energetic force that the heart holds. And if we allow ourselves to touch this force within us, touch this energy within us in our hearts, then we are able to turn on the current of this force that can move the trajectory of the motion that we're in and change our life. And what that does constantly is that this motion, this energy from the heart, when it touches us, we can actually connect with it, we can create enough force to change that motion that we've been stuck in, and it moves us out of our comfort zone, which we feel is very predictable and very stable, that college, house, spouse, child, milestones that we are running after. And it can put us in places which may be uncomfortable. It can put us in places which are something that will bring out that part of me that I was meant to discover within my life on this planet, and understand that this motion now can take me to my perfection as a human being. So now we're looking at a connection of the heart with the journey of the human soul, and we're seeing that why is it that the throne, the heart, is so important, is because the throne is given to the king, and the king can change things around. There is a free will, there is a power that the king holds in the matters of the kingdom, in the matters of their dominion, in the matters of the people under the king can pass orders to change things around. Heart is that king, that power point, that point of power within us that can change the trajectory of this constant motion that we find ourselves looped into, that we don't find the energy, or we don't find the courage to break out of. And so when a person starts to recognize this pain in the heart, Rumi says pain is where the wound is where the light enters. And it's so interesting that Gary Zukov goes on in this chapter to talk about light, which we, inshallah, will try to touch. Now, we're seeing now that the heart will give us the emotion, and the emotion is this emotion of suffering and pain and rejection. When we look into it, it has the power to create within us something of a motion, something of a force that will change the motion, and this motion can break us out of that orbit that we were stuck in and put us into a new trajectory and change the motion of our life, which can be very different from what we had planned and wanted this predictability with. And what happens to a human being when these things change is that we start to feel very uncomfortable. We start to feel the fear of the unknown, because now where we're moving into is a place we don't know. First, we had these milestones set that I want this, this, this. Now that is changing. And now, because that is changing, there's a chance that what will come is going to be something new that I don't know, that I have not seen before, experienced before. And this is the path of the mystics. The mystics, what they do is that they end up choosing a life which is full of mysteries. A mystic is somebody who is in search of mystery. And the greatest mystery that we can ever think of is God Himself. And a mystic, when he starts looking for this mystery, then he has to endeavor into a way of life, a force in their life, which will constantly change this predictable motion and keep putting them into situations where fear fills their heart, where pain fills their heart. And every time a pain or a fear fills their heart, there is a breaking open. There is a seed that breaks open and leads you into a new realm, a new layer of growth. And there we see that in this kind of a journey where the seed keeps breaking and opening into new layers, there are new truths about the self that open to us. Now, when Gregory decides to, take this path where he is sitting with himself in solitude, it reminds us of the sages. It reminds us of our wise prophets who took the time in solitude to ask these deep questions. And we see the holy prophet going into the cave of Hira to ponder and sit with himself and ask these deeper questions until his heart is open enough, expansive enough to receive this massive revelation from God. The heart was being prepared slowly and slowly, so that one day it found that place of reception. It became an open conduit, it became an open vessel to attract this lightning charge from the heavens above, to receive heavy downloads of knowledge, which are knowledge of the divine. In that sense, the heart within a human being becomes the house of God. It becomes that place that can now reflect to us the knowledge, the divine knowledge of God, and keep us in a place of connection to a knowledge which is unlimited and infinite and widely connected. That's why we see that a lot of times people can connect to a knowledge base through this inner practice, through this inner channeling, which was something of information, for example, that somebody else held. Another human being had that information, and then now you are channeling that information without even trying, without even knowing, and you had no knowledge that this other person also has this knowledge, and you somehow get connected to this wider system of information. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Noor, al-ilmu noorun, right? And we say Allahu noor samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. And Allahu noorun, Allah is the light. And ilmu noorun, the knowledge is light. And so this heart of the human soul has that capacity to connect to that light. Now, when we are connected to that light, then Quran says very explicitly, Ja al haq wa zahaq al batil, innal batila kana zahuqa. Surely truth has come and falsehood has vanished, and surely the truth, the haq, was meant to establish itself. Now, a lot of translations of the Quran will talk about haq as light, that light has come and darkness has vanished. When we connect to this divine light, remember, I had lit up this candle over here, that the single candle in a room can light up the darkness and make you see things even with a single candle. It's enough to dissipate the darkness. Point being that the entire room is dark, but a tiny flicker of light can make so much visible to us. You just need very little glimpse of that divine light to disperse this darkness that we saw in Hank's life, that we saw that he was not able to go on because he found this emptiness. And he was not able to come to a place of balance between the light and the dark because he was not willing to ask those difficult questions about himself. Now, Gary Zukov goes on and talks about Gregory, and he says that these changes did not come easily to Gregory. His transition from an angry, manipulative, disdainful person to a more caring and considerate person was a journey through pain that required much courage. Yet, by committing himself to that journey, he changed his life. From the point of view of Gregory's consciousness, the uniform flow of Gregory's life was altered significantly by his determination to confront his pain, and was altered further by his determination to cultivate his new perceptions. The force that altered the uniform motion of Gregory's life was his decision to enter into his life consciously. Now, this is what I was saying earlier, that we see an awakening in Gregory's life. There is a conscious life that he's choosing to do. And when we were talking about the heart, we were saying that it is in asking and reaping the answers to these difficult questions that we can change the trajectories of our life. We can keep on moving in different directions of our life. And this is where we can do life consciously. If we do life consciously, if we are thinking and asking, and we are not doing life on autopilot, and if we start to have that presence in our intentions, and we're constantly connecting to these deeper spurts of anxiety, deeper spurts of pain within us, what we do then is that we start to exercise our free will in creating our life rather than just living a life that is happening to us. And his decision to live his life consciously is the key to him awakening to the bigger questions of this journey, of this life, of the discovery of the self. When we start asking these questions about ourselves and the pain, and like we're seeing that there's a transition in Gregory's life from an angry, manipulative, and disdainful person into a person who's kind and considerate and courageous. There's a change in his character, right? And character change is the journey to God. We've always said that God has described himself to us, introduced himself to us through his beautiful Asma al-Husna. And his names are beautiful characters. When we acknowledge and when we connect ourselves to these characteristics of God, and we start to make an intentional, conscious journey into acquiring these beautiful characteristics of God, that is when we start to get closer to God. Because going closer to God, like we said, is like acquiring the characteristics of your friend. And when you acquire the characteristics and qualities of your friend, you automatically are close to your friend, whether they're geographically close to you or not. So now we're seeing that the heart is not only a place which triggers pain and holds these emotions, it is a place which then becomes an opening to the light. It becomes a place where we can now connect with a kind of self-knowledge which can lead us into new adventures in life. And every discomfort that comes with asking these questions and the kind of fear and pain it creates propels us into a deeper understanding of who we are. I'm also reading this amazing book, which I'm kind of obsessed with these days, is this book Cured. And this book is talking about, it's talking about the um, sick people, people who have diseases. I don't know what is the camera. Yeah. It's talking about, I think my camera is blurring out. In this book, Dr. Jeff Rediger, he is talking about spontaneous remissions, cases of people who were inflicted with incurable diseases like massive tumors, cancers, lymphomas and whatnot. And he's talking about how there were cases around the world that found healing, not through the conventional medicine, but these were literally people who were told that you have like a couple of months to live and you don't have much time and you need to go and you need to just wait it out kind of thing. But these people miraculously healed and they found complete cure. And in medical science, um, they call it spontaneous remissions. And what Dr. Jeff has discussed in the book is that, medical science would shy away from discussing these cases because they would say that these are flukes. But what Dr. Jeff has done a great service to us by writing this book is that he talks about how certain changes in the lifestyles of these people saved their life. Now, this is what I wanted to bring your attention to, is that these people who experienced complete healing after experiencing incurable diagnosis are people who, out of all this research and interviewing, Dr. Jeff finds that these were the people who said that we had a complete change in our personality. We changed and our identities changed. We were not the same people when we realized that we were sickness free, we were disease free, we were symptom free. And they had these realizations that, oh, hold on, wait a minute, I'm not the same person, I'm not living the same life, I'm not eating the same stuff, I'm not talking the same way. He talks about all these spiritual healers, and one of the places he talks about is Brazil, where there's a healing center. And he's interviewing one person who got healing from that place. And, he says that I went and I spoke to that man and I was speaking to his wife. And I asked him, did anything change before and after you got the healing? And the man said, no, nothing really changed. I'm the same farmer and I'm doing the same life. But Dr. Jeff says that his wife, she kind of spoke up and she said he's not the same man. Earlier, he had no time for his family. Earlier, he was very occupied. He was a very angry and grumpy man. But after he got unwell, he really changed. He changed as a person. Now he has time for his family. He sits with us. He talks to us. He connects with his children. He's a very, very different man. She said that before the disease, we had lost him. We didn't have him. It was like, we don't have him. But after he fell sick, it's like we found this person all over. Like we had him at home. So we're seeing that even without realizing, this man experienced a change in his characteristics, which we're seeing in Gregory, that from this person who was angry and manipulative and condescending, he's become now this soft and courageous person. So he has now adopted a character which is closer to as Uswatul Hasana. It's a beautiful character. He's coming closer to Uswatul Hasana, the beautiful characteristics, the beautiful akhlaq. And when we do that, we find a healing, we find a change within us towards becoming more divine, towards more godly. And because there is nothing but God, because we are connected to our source, because God is our source and our home and our journey. Our journey back home is towards God because we're seeking perfection. We're constantly seeking God. Our perfection lies in changing our character, in having these changes within us. Now, when I say this, it is a journey into Tawheed. It's a journey that every human being, in the Quran, Allah says that every human being is striving to connect, to meet with God, to have this liqa with Allah. And no matter what we say, this striving is a constant laborious striving, and for sure they will meet. Innaka kadhan kadhan famulaki. So the human being is constantly in a state of striving, but it takes resistance to avoid these questions, because life will keep putting us in places where pain will come up and it will beckon us towards looking into these difficult questions in life. The mystics and the Urafa and the teachers talk a lot about going through these stages in life where you have these difficult situations which fill your heart. Allama Tabatabai, in his book Kernel of the Kernel, talks about these stages, and he says that your chest feels like it is torn with fear and anxiety, and you have anxiety for your family, and you have anxiety for your people, and you feel like everything is falling apart. But then he says that that person who is intentional only towards finding God, looking for God, will have that faith to walk into this walk of fire and break off from what the society demands of them, break off from what everybody asks of them. And they enter this place of junoon, they enter this place of what the society will call madness, because now they're behaving like no one else is behaving. They're doing things that nobody else is doing. Now they don't fit in. So they're the weird one. They stick out. They don't make sense to people. And what people don't understand, they are scared of that. What people don't make cannot make sense of, they are fearful of it. And people get very uncomfortable around people like that. Why? Because this is a person who is taking pain head on. This is a person who is asking difficult questions and discovering truths. And in that discovery of truth, um, there's a sincere striving, there's a sincere change, there's an alteration. This person is not the same person they were before. And when a person starts to emit this kind of light, it starts to make other people very uncomfortable, because number one, it starts to remind them of their own difficult questions, which they have put under the pillow and they don't want to see. They've pushed it under the carpet and they don't want to see. Why? Because pain is uncomfortable. And a lot of us would rather live very comfortable lives where we don't have to face the pain, where the pain doesn't interfere with the trajectory of our life. And so these people, when they start to do weird things and change things around, it starts to remind people that, wait a second, you also had your journey, you also had your questions. You need to ask those questions and get on with your own journey to find yourself, because the journey to God is all about finding truths within us. The more we get insights into who we are, the more we start to understand who we are, is when we can start understanding God, is when we can start understanding this higher power and find the truth, the al-haq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-haq. And so we see that the Urafa and the mystics were very shamed for their erratic behaviors and their abnormal characteristics. We see that they were blasphemed, they were persecuted for their belief systems, even though, technically faith and belief is a very personal matter. Now, when people start to emit this kind of behavior, which makes other people uncomfortable, it's because the masses are under this lure. They're duped into a sleep. There is a lack of awakenedness. There is a sleepiness that keeps us, um, you know, drugged, and it keeps us numb to the pain. So we see this, that in the masses, people will just keep following and keep doing like everything that everybody's doing, and it's a sheep mentality. It's everybody doing what everybody's doing, and it keeps people very comfortable, but it also creates this numbness. And it's in this in the danger of this numbness is that we start to become a very sedentary, we start to become a very regressive society, where we start to see injustice. We start to see rich getting richer, poor getting poorer, because then there is no feeling, there is no emotion in the heart that can recognize when there's an injustice. You feel pain, because imagine a human being who stays sensitive to the pain might find it very important to leave their home and go and do something which is their calling. For example, a doctor who has a very comfortable life in the city, but now feels the need to go in the village to help those who are dying of hunger or pneumonia or any disease, right? They'll have to leave their comfort zone. But because the nagging question of I need to help these people makes us um uncomfortable, because then it will lead to a change that I need to make in my life, my routine, my family, my children, and what I had aspired to achieve, and my milestones. It puts us in a position where we want to shut off this voice in our head which is saying, maybe you need to go to the village, maybe you need to go and help people, maybe you need to take a break from society, maybe you need to stop going to all these parties. You need to break off from this numbing routine where people are taking drugs, they're into alcohol, they're into partying, sleeping around. It just numbs that question, that deep question and reflection that the heart is begging you to see. And these difficult questions will lead you into a situation of a painful change, so you don't want to see it. And so the society sort of starts to get numbed into a lull. There's a lull in the society, and then when there's a sleep that takes over the society, some people will be awake and they will stir things up. And when they stir this up, they're the awakened ones, they're the light. And this is what the prophets did. And that's why the prophets, they and the sages who shook the societies, they were persecuted for the things they said. They were not accepted. They were not readily hailed and said, oh wow, you're bringing the truth to us. So the light that these prophets hold within them, it starts to break the shells of those who are sleeping. And the heart within has a prophet inside that starts to get activated through the power that these outer prophets have brought to us, the sages they have brought to us. And the energy of these prophets is within all of us who choose to wake up, who choose to ask these difficult questions, to pay attention to these difficult questions. All of us, when we go on this journey, then we have to start becoming very, very honest with ourselves. We have to start looking at our fears and all that we're holding within ourselves. And once we start to go on this journey, we have to be ready that it can lead us into very unpleasant situations. It can lead us into confrontations where we won't be accepted readily, and we will have to stick to our truth to pave our way to ourselves. What do I mean by that is that um, what Gregory did in this example is that he made a change. And there's a hadith of the Holy Prophet which says that a mu'min, a believer, is one whose 2 days are not the same. He's constantly changing. You're not the same person you were yesterday. You're constantly in a state of motion. You're changing. What that means is that you're in a constant state of letting a force be applied on you. This this life can just go on and lead to a very despondent end if we choose not to ask those questions. However, if we do, then the prophet is saying that you will be changing every day. You will not be the same person. You're changing every day. And I usually quote Alan Watts, and Alan Watts says you are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 seconds ago. That means once we fine tune into our own truths within us and we start reading ourselves and we open the book that is within us, moment to moment, we will be guided into intuitive voices within us that will help us into discovering something new and a new truth about ourselves. And when we start to discover these new things about ourselves, it will take a lot of courage for us to see it, feel it, accept it, work on it, and then change. And so, I mean, Gregory could have easily been very disdainful, and he must could have decided and said, you know what, I don't need to change. What are people going to think? Who was I yesterday? Now I'm a different person. But I believe that when we bring that change within ourselves, we can be such um, we feel so satisfied with this existence. We feel so fulfilled that, Dr. Wayne Dyer says, don't die with your music inside of you. You feel like you're living your truth in every moment. And in every moment, seeing your truth is seeing Al-Haq, seeing God. And I believe so that the ayat in Surah Rahman, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, um, kulla yawmin huwa fi sha'an. Like kulla yawm is like every moment. Yawm is translated as moment, not just day. Kulla yawmin huwa fi sha'an, that you're witnessing the shan of God. You're witnessing a manifestation of God in every moment. Now, usually we will translate this and say, well, this is something that you see in the hereafter. And in the hereafter, some people will be awarded with a station in heaven that will give them the opportunity to see the tajalliyat of God, the manifestations of God. And there will be a level of Jannah where certain friends of God will witness these new manifestations of God in every moment. But the truth is, the mystics are telling us that your akhirat is right now, your hereafter is right now, your hell and heaven is right now, your liqa Allah is a choice that you can make here and now. And through living a present and conscious life, if we enter the heart that is giving us signals, that is giving us questions, that is telling us, you need to go deep within yourselves. Every time we discover something about ourselves, we discover a new truth, we are witnessing a new manifestation of God. This is something we can manifest here and now. And this is what would make life a worthy experience, where all of the faculties of our existence as a human being, where we are human and we are a being, we employ all of our faculties, the inner and the outer, the zahir and the batin, and we bring it into a union, we bring it into a unison, we bring it into a place of tawheed. Because like I was saying earlier, that all of us are striving for perfection, right? Our solace, our sukoon, our peace, our healing, our every good feeling that we ask for, that we yearn for, that we're craving for, lies in Tawheed, lies in our unity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lies in becoming one. It lies in in the union of our fractured selves and fractured identities. And we cannot create that union, we cannot create that tawheed until and unless we are ready to see the different fractured parts within us. We are ready to see what lies within us that needs to come into oneness. And all of these ideas that look very spiritual, and we have always disconnected them and put them as concepts that are of future, sometime in the hereafter. They are actual realities right now. And if we can sit and ponder about how we can tap into, tawheed and, oneness and wholeness right now within this reality, then we can truly glimpse the manifestations of God, the tajalliyat of God in our life with the heart. Because what the heart can feel and what the heart can sense and see is a very deep experience compared to what the mind and the brain experiences generally in our world of science and tangibility. And I had mentioned that I want to talk a little bit more about what Gary Zukov says about light. He goes on and he says that a personality that is not whole lives in a state of splinteredness, as represented by individual colors or combinations of them. Right? So we were talking about Hank, and we then talked about Gregory, and we saying that Hank's light was very fractured, it was splintered, it was broken like the different colors. Growing up, I always taught this thing to my kids, which I learned from their teacher, very beautiful soul. She would always talk about the heart and how it has light, and when we start to abuse the heart by doing wrong things, by sinning, by being mindless about what we're indulging in, then what happens is that the heart starts to get these dots, these black dots on it. And these are the dots of, sin and, mindless things that cause rust on the heart. So over here, he's giving this example, and he's saying that the way the light, the light, it kind of gets divided into its different colors. It kind of loses its wholeness. And Gary is talking about the black and the white, and he's talking about light and dark. And he's saying that there are symbols that we see around us. He says that a personality now, which is splintered, is like the differentiated individual colors. A personality, but that is not splintered, lives in a state of wholeness as represented by white light. A personality that loses touch with its soul, that loses the source of its light, is a personality that has become capable of what we call evil, as represented by blackness. What we call evil is the absence of light, of love. In all cases, when we speak poetically of light, we associate it with purity and insight and divine inspiration. As we shall see, this type of light is not merely poetical, it is real. And so this is what we were saying, that this connection to soul is through the heart, through the emotion, through these deep questions. When we pay attention, we can open our channels to divine light. And he goes on to say that a soul can find it difficult to walk the way of light through the course of their time on earth. It can find that learning to live in light is a difficult sojourn. Through the choices that it makes while it is incarnate upon the earth, the choice of anger instead of forgiveness, for example, condemnation instead of understanding, the soul starts to accumulate negative karma, because it is living a very autopilot life. It is living a life which is not a present life, not a conscious life. And so on autopilot, we have tendencies to fall into the negative. And when we do that, we start to develop this rust on our heart, because which is something to think about. And I just want to end with the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that at night he would do a tasbih, a zikr of astaghfar 70 times. And people said that you're sinless, you're infallible, you're a masoom. Why? What is making you do this? And he would say that when I go around in the world and interact with people, a certain kind of rust accumulates in my heart, which the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uh, washes it out and reconnects and reignites that light. But this was still a question in my mind, which was recently answered by my teacher Sheikh Arif in one of his talks, which I found so beautiful. He said that we hear that our imams, when they would do wudu, they would shudder, in awe of God. Um, it's as if they were experiencing a certain presence of God in those moments. So we would say that the Holy Prophet, he's saying that a certain rust comes on my heart. um, and then we're seeing Imam Hassan, this is Imam Hassan, saying that he would do wuzu, and he would be shuddering with awe of God. So Sheikh was saying that why is it that even the infallibles are not in a state of constant awe of God? Shouldn't they be in a constant state of this immense, intense presence of God? And he said that, if we were in that severe, intense, connection and awe of God, then our worldly life would not happen. We won't be able to function. We also have this human dimension to us that needs to function. So, what we need to do is we need to peg our day with moments of awe. And that's why the 5-time prayers, the wazoo, and the philosophy behind these actions and rituals, it pegs our day with these moments of awe. And that's why Imam Hassan is seeing with this immense awe at the time of doing wuzu, because that is a moment of pegging yourself in this intentional connection to God. And in other moments when the intention is weaker, perhaps, we find ourselves losing that mindfulness. And then the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings us back into that presence of heart. And so, Alhamdulillah, I would like to close our session today with a dua. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O Allah, we come to you with utter helplessness of our own selves. O Allah, we find it so hard to look into ourselves, to take a peek into our own darknesses, to take a peek into our light. We are small and scared beings. The dark scares us, and the light also scares us. We're scared of that which makes us splintered, and we're scared of that which makes us whole. Oh Allah, we're scared because it takes courage, it takes bravery, it takes so much out of us to follow our callings, to listen to our heart and intuition, to listen to this voice in the divine treasure that is the heart. Oh Allah, open our eyes, inner eyes. Oh Allah, open our hearts to see the truth, to openly accept the truth, to walk into the path of truth. Oh Allah, oh Allah, we ask you for courage, we ask you for help, we ask you for signs to help us nudge us on. Oh Allah, we come to you with no knowledge of the self, with no knowledge of the truth. Oh Allah, we have nothing, we have no idea. Oh Allah, we are lost in our confused chaos. Every now and then we just find ourselves in utter confusion. And oh Allah, the only rope that we hold on to is you, and the only light we put our hopes onto is you. And oh Allah, if you do not help us, and if you don't hold us, and if you don't hold our hand and guide us, we would be in utter loss. We have nowhere to go and no one to ask but you, Ya Allah. You are the most powerful, you are the most well-knowing, you are the most merciful, and you have never ever left your abd alone. And the breath we take is a sign of your presence in our life. Oh Allah, make us more present. Oh Allah, bring us to the present moment and bring us to the presence of your presence. Oh Allah, we can say these things all we want, but when and how they will happen is only a gift that can be received through your will and permission. So we ask you, O Allah, make us one of your proximal friends, make us one of your special friends who receive these gifts from you. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. I will stop the recording.